Mindset Mavericks, your blueprint for bold thinking and boundless growth.
Do you ever feel like you're juggling a million things at once, but not actually making progress? Today's guest, Aliki Samone, gets it. She's an engineer, author, musician, and entrepreneur who figured out how to balance multiple passions without feeling scattered. So after a decade designing spacecraft, she walked away to build something completely different. The Summit Method. Her systems help people map out their lives and actually follow through. So if you're tired of setting goals that go nowhere, this episode is to give you a framework to help change that. So welcome to Mindset Mavericks, and thank you for joining us, Aliki.
Hello, hello. Thank you for having me. I'm excited to chat with you today and see what we can uncover in the conversation.
You've had a fascinating start to your career as well. So you've had what most people probably consider a dream job, working on spacecraft. So you can tell us a little bit about your history and what got you into working on spacecraft in the first place.
Sure thing. So a big theme that will probably continue throughout this conversation is I am a right brain, left brain. I am a creative and an analytical person. I'm an engineer and, an author and a musician and an artist. And that has been something that my whole life, ever since I was a child, I go back and forth. That kind of beginning struggle of who do I want to be? What am I? What does the world want to tell me I am? And in the end, that led to me saying I had a crossroad. I, got to the end of high school and I needed to decide, to go to university for music, to go to university for engineering. And I chose engineering. I am very happy about that decision. And I think it really opened me up to this whole new life. I ended up picking aerospace engineering as, I love space and just the vast universe and all of the things that it can, you can discover and have. And I learned so much through that process by letting myself, go into this analytical path, which, as you can imagine, it was really hard. And I spent all of my time, throughout college studying, becoming, an engineer and jumping into aerospace. I got my first job designing spacecraft, working lots of long hours, doing, detailed design work, super fun. Very interesting. I even got the opportunity to go to some launch bases and, see some of our satellites get bolted onto a rocket. And I wouldn't trade any of that. But when you do that, when you make a decision like that, like I did, it makes it very hard to say, but wait a second, what about this other person? Or maybe for some of you, a different way to say it to relate to what you feel is, do you have any hobbies or just things you like doing that you always kind of put on the back burner because they either don't make money and we're all focused about making money, or you don't have the time for it, you've got family and obligations, but they sit there. And sometimes they tap on you, they come clawing, in the back of your mind, wishing that you had the ability to bring them forward. So I would say the answer to your question is I jumped into engineering and I loved every bit of it. It was a choice. But along the way, I was always being reminded of this side, the music, the art. I wasn't an author yet. We'll get to that. But how do I navigate that? And the older and older you get, the more adult you become. I leave college and I feel like I might actually be becoming an adult now. What do you do? And then a lot of people, including myself, right? We all kind of spiral in various ways. You get in this chaos. You get in this stir of, what am I doing with my life? Did I make the right choices? Am I happy? How do I make the right steps towards goals, toward success, whatever that might be? And whether it's in your early 20s, your midlife, or even later, we all still have goals and things we're working toward, right? And that's kind of where everything tumbled around for me in those beginning years of working as an aerospace engineer and, loving this adult life transition of having a job and, doing the things I was supposed to do. And saying, wait a second, what am I doing? What am I doing for my personal growth? What am I doing for my financials, my career, my community? And what is life? And that's how I eventually got to the book.
Crazy. I think one of
I'll stop there.
The things that does happen in, like I say, late teens, early 20s, you're forced into making these decisions, which can potentially have lifelong impacts. Just as an example, my son's currently doing engineering at college, and is just at the point of having to make a decision if he's going down electrical engineering, mechanical engineering, and having to make a choice. And I know he's very much just stuck, doesn't know where to go. And it's like, you don't even know what that leads to at that age. It's a big decision to make. And I think people do fall into that trap of, you have to make a decision and then you feel like you're stuck in that one path, like you said, for years to come, and your hobbies and interests, and whether it's sports or music or anything else, can take a bit of a sideline. So yeah, I can definitely resonate with that with myself as well. Just making those tough decisions so early.
Absolutely. And I like to tell people, as hard as it is, we're talking about engineering here, and that's fun. That is close to home for me. But whatever your career might be, or whatever you chose to do at a young age, it's hard, but believe it or not, you can change. I spent 10 plus years in aerospace engineering, and I decided to leave, the startup company I was at, and kind of see what else was happening in life. I ended up going back to some engineering, but I think it's healthy to allow ourselves to stop doing something, even though maybe we paid a lot of money to go to school for it, or, put a lot of time into learning something. Throw out the engineering, go become a baker. Maybe you were meant to be a baker, or maybe you try that and you go back to engineering. But we need to give ourselves a little bit more space in life, and it's hard, either as parents, you want your kids to be successful, or peer pressure, all that kind of stuff. But it's I like to challenge people to take a deep breath and maybe explore other aspects of what life can bring. You never know.
I'm going to go into
You might become an
how
author.
you managed to make some of those pivots as well. But I'm quite intrigued. So I'd imagine the aerospace industry would be one where self-doubt or imposter syndrome can creep in. That's kind of me speculating, but is that something you found?
Absolutely. I love you bringing up imposter syndrome, because I actually think that's something that's so prominent in multiple facets of life, definitely my life. For engineering, to start there, it's a lot. You jump out of high school, you don't even know who you are, and you're just going to become this thing called an engineer. And there's not a lot of programs or things that really explain what that means. What does an engineer do? I know some people either have engineering parents or, some sort of example, but I did not. I was just like, college counselor said engineering, let's go try it. And being a female engineer, I was one of 6 women in my entire graduating class there was about 150 people in my senior graduating class at my university for aerospace engineering in the astro side. And that's a lot. I mean, I got used to being in a primarily male dominated industry, but you have a lot to think about and understand. And you're a growing human and adult, and there is a lot of imposter syndrome. There is a lot of, how do I have to maybe work really hard to prove myself in a world where there's not exactly a lot of people maybe who look like me or think like me around. And I think the way I got through that, and it's the same way I deal with imposter syndrome about becoming an author or being a musician, different facets of life. It's the mindset around confidence. And I like to teach people about a positive growth mindset, which, believe it or not, we do have the power to some extent, control our minds. If you just take a step back and you think about, okay, why is my mind racing in a certain way? Why do I feel this imposter syndrome? What am I worried about? What's the root cause of what's happening here? And if you just start piecing that apart, you might be able to find, the real issue crux of, it's some interaction I had with a colleague, and they created this negative energy that I didn't realize was truly making me feel like I had this imposter syndrome, that I couldn't do it, that who am I to be, an aerospace engineer? And if you don't spend the time to kind of find those little tidbits or understand the power of your mindset, and the mind, to change that, it is hard to overcome. And I think I just spent so many years saying, you know what? No, I'm going to stand up on this little tiny mountain or little pedestal here and say, I'm going to do it. I'm going to do it for me. I'm going to do it for my family. I am going to continue to prove that I can, and not necessarily trying to prove to others. I'm going to prove to myself. And I think that all feeds back to the word I said earlier, confidence, which, for those who struggle with confidence, it's hard. You can't just say, hey, don't worry, just be confident. It's not that easy. And so I say it's a balance between learning to grow your confidence and leveraging the power of listening to your mind to help you make those tweaks to build confidence. And confidence is the key to getting past something like imposter syndrome. Remembering imposter syndrome comes because you are thinking or worrying about what other people think and putting yourself in boxes that maybe you don't need to. And we all struggle with it in our own various ways. I still do, right? And it happened to me this morning, actually. I said, just think through the motions and find out how to change your mind.
Easy to struggle with. You have a thought and then you believe that thought to be the truth. And then you can start kind of spiraling on those negative thoughts. How do you go about actually identifying which ones are helpful thoughts and which ones are not helping, and how do you stop those negative thoughts creeping in?
Absolutely. So this is perfect because, I was talking about the power of the mind and your mindset, and that it's this box. Your mind is an infinite sandbox. I mean, we have the ability to go to sleep at night, and a lot of us, I know not everybody has, really intricate dreams, but I'm definitely someone who has a lot of crazy dreams. That's your mind. While you're sleeping, you're creating these visions, you create worlds that don't even exist in there. And what I'm trying to get at there is that can be scary. That means you can get lost in your mind. If you only allow yourself to think, that is how we spiral. That is how we can't work past things. And that's when I like to really push, myself, clients, family, friends, anyone here, listening to this podcast, visualization. I take out a piece of paper, I grab a pen, and I do a mind map. I put a center prompt on the middle of the page. Maybe it's what's bothering me right now. When it comes to me doing life planning, with the book, it's what does my ideal life look like? What are past experiences or people or things that have brought me good times or traumatized? And you give yourself 5 minutes and you actually let yourself write everything that's coming to mind. This is an act of taking all of those thoughts that are spiraling inside of your brain and forcing them out through the pen, forcing them into a visualization. What that means is you now have data in front of you, and that data can't move. It's on ink on paper, right? Whereas in your brain, you can continue to manipulate your thoughts until they either become toxic and negative, or you work yourself out into a positive situation. And that can be really hard. So I like to take a moment, like, I did this morning, and said, what is happening? Why am I stressed out about this thing? Let's say, take this podcast. I was not stressed about this podcast, but let's say I was nervous about doing a public speaking event or a podcast. I would start writing that down and say, what bothers you? Are you afraid the internet will go out? Are you afraid that, whatever is coming to mind? And then you work through those things and say, is that bad? What's the worst that can happen in a lot of these situations that you start bringing out of your mind? It allows you to funnel some real ideas or some real actions from it. When it comes to, dealing with imposter syndrome and challenges, there's no better tool than showing on paper what your mind is thinking. And then I'll say this really quick. If you're afraid to write something on paper because you don't want people to see it, then throw it away, burn it, whatever you need to do. But you have to let yourself write it down on paper. Or if you're confident about what you wrote down, put it up on your wall. Let it be a reminder of the things and the thoughts that came for you in that moment, in that struggle, and then build upon it with other mind maps. Now, this data thread, this is just the beginning. When it comes to the Summit method or this life planning technique that I have written a couple books on now, and I like to, help people with, in the end, a lot of it is so much about data. It's about understanding your mental tools, your mindset, which is what we're talking about right now and how critical that is, writing it down in a detailed plan, and then executing in a way where you're reviewing that data. You're looking at your piece of paper on the wall, constantly understanding what are your worry triggers? How are you going to adjust that? And if you spend all of your time stuck in your mind, that is where you're going to spiral. That is where you're going to go into the nightmares, right? We talked about dreams at the very beginning of my little spiel here. Dreams are an amazing place where you go to sleep and you might be able to have fantastical moments or scary nightmares, but you wake up in the end and you move on with your day. That's the key. You're waking up and moving on with your day. So if you're spiraling, if you're having mental challenges, that's you essentially daydreaming. So you need to wake up by writing it on paper and seeing what the thoughts are so you can use some logic
Yeah, I think
to maybe change some of those
being
thoughts.
a dream and just how much creativity there is in dreams and how much your brain creates that without any thoughts going into it, and it's just a result of very active brain. So it's a really interesting analogy, just how much of those thoughts can just be created, not be truth and fact. When you're awake as well, it still happens, and it's just being able to have those thoughts about your thoughts and like I say, just analyze them. So yeah, it's a really interesting analogy. You also touched on your plan as well. I know you're quite big into your 5-year plans. So I wanted to ask you a few questions about that. So what is it about a 5-year plan that makes it so important for you, and why is that the sweet spot, not say a 1-year plan or a 10-year plan?
Perfect. So I like this question because yes, my book, Conquer Your Summit, How to Build a 5-Year Plan and Live Your Best Life, is centered around building a 5-year plan. A 5-year plan is something that I started with, because I think society says 5-year plan, 5-year plan. And when people ask this question, they're like, but do I really need to do a 5-year plan? I don't know what I'm going to do next week. That seems really hard. That seems so rigid. I don't want to be stuck in something for 5 years. What 5 years does is it allows you to think beyond this year, beyond into a future destination. You might be someone, who's really young, trying to say, I am planning for a family. And that might be something that might be multiple years out for you because you have, I have some friends, they're like, I want to have my job together and I want to be able to buy a house and I want to have this all set up before I start having kids. Okay, well, now you're looking at a 4 or 5-year plan. So there are these big goals, big dreams around personal growth, which personal growth is like, fitness, education, spirituality, self-care, travel, all those things you do for you, how you grow, personal growth, financial. So if you're saving for that house, you're probably going to have a couple of years of working toward getting savings for a down payment. Career. Big career goals take time depending on the career and what you're trying to do. But let's say you want to become, a director or some higher level manager or a senior level engineer. It's going to take time to get there. And community. We talked a little about maybe starting a family, but community is something that also grows with time. And community is your friends, your family, external societal groups that you might be a part of. So I say 5 because you need to have the mountain peak. I like to use a mountain analogy with what I do. You look up at this beautiful mountain, you're like, that big, shiny, awesome object, that big goal of whatever, between those 4 pillars of success that you want to do, it's this in the future thing. And then you have to be able to, come back to the starting point, which is your now. And you mentioned, why not 1 year? Why 5 years? Well, actually, you are going to focus on a bunch of those things. The Summit method makes you make this X-year plan where, yes, I definitely like to index on 5 because it is an easier way for people to really wrap their head around it. But the method actually encourages you to choose your X, whether it's 3, 5, 10, 7. Everybody kind of has a different number they want to use, the X year plan. Sake of this conversation, I'm using 5. But that 5, that 7, that 10, those are your big goals. And then you bring it down to say, okay, pie in the sky, big goals. Break it down into mini steps. And those mini steps are what's like one big thing I could be doing each year to get to that larger goal. And now that one thing is now kind of a guiding light for each year. So if we have saving up to make a big purchase or a house or whatever it might be, now you break that up and you say, okay, well, in order to get X amount for a down payment, I need to save Y amount each year. Well, now that big scary goal of buying a house seems a little less daunting because it's not the X thousands of dollars, it's the Y thousands of dollars, which is less because it's divided by 5, or 4, whatever the number might be. Then you take that mini step or that year goal that you have, which you kind of plot into year 1, year 2, year, etc. And you break it down even further. So back to the mountain, you've started on your trail. You picked up a map, you found some mini steps for each year, and you start traversing. And in order to really keep going up the right path, in order to get to that final big goal, you need to break it up a little further. So this is where I then focus in on the 1 year, where it's, okay, what are the 12 steps that you need to do for that year's goal? And of course, that means the one thing you're going to do per month. And I like to focus on, I ask people to make big goals on their personal growth, financial, career, and community. I believe those are 4 pillars that help us live a holistic life. So people will be creating these steps for all 4 of those, but one for each month. And this is because it breaks down the spiral. We started this entire podcast talking about how easy it is to get lost in your mind and stuck into what am I doing and am I on the right path? Well, you're on the right path and you can get yourself out of the spiral. If you break down those things that you want in the future or the big scary things that are happening in your life, break them down into bite-sized chunks. And these 12 steps, the 1 year action plan, will help you get there. Because now you're just looking at what do I have to do this month, right? And maybe, it's set up a budget. The first step is you need to create a budget and, set up a savings account if you're, starting from scratch, or research some investment opportunities that excite you. I'm going on the whole financial train for saving for something big, but you could bring it to people who want to run a really big race or something. Well, don't be so stressed about, oh my gosh, I could never run 100 kilometers. How do I get there? No, this month, you're just going to go buy running shoes, right? And so it's a method to say, take the 5 years, break it down into pieces and get to that 1 year plan, get to that step where you're just looking at this month. And I know your question was about why 5 years? And it's 5 years because it gives you the insight to know where you're going. What's that bigger, beautiful mountain? And then breaking it down in a way that you can actually get there. Because 1 year, goals and New Year's resolutions and, all that stuff that we all like to jump into in January, it's all going to fade. It's all going to fade if you don't actually have, that path laid out to where you're trying to get to.
So many different aspects as well. And it is focusing on, like I say, health, career goals. And it's just how much one impacts the other anyway. So if you are too focused on one aspect, you're too focused on your career and you're neglecting your societal goals and community goals, then that does affect your mental health and it affects performance, and it does have such a massive impact. And I think people do rely too much on just focusing on career and neglecting those other aspects of life, which is exactly where we started with you going into engineering. So it's kind of bringing it all together and giving a real world example of it. So what are some of the mistakes that you do see people making when they are trying to make these plans, their 5 year plans? Are you seeing any particular themes where people are going wrong?
I find, it's interesting because it kind of pairs off the question you just asked. The 5 year plan feels rigid, that the fear that you do all this work and you've made a plan and now you got to go do it. You got to execute. And that could be scary. That can be confining in and of itself. And I really like to make sure people know that the whole value of structuring yourself in this way is the value of change. So I actually have people sit down. I call it a summit event. So that's you taking the time to set aside what you need to do, and you build out this plan. You think about what you need, and you build the life that you want on paper. And then in 3 months, essentially every quarter of the year, you go back and you look at all of that data and you change it. So the thing that and have learned and try to work with people on, to answer your question, is the value of change and embracing change. Just because you made a 5-year plan does not mean you have to stick with that 5-year plan. As long as you use a 3-month cadence where you check in with your health, you check in with your, where you're trying to go with your personal, soul and self-care and the personal growth you set forth. Where are you on your financial path? Are you making the steps you need to make in your career? And, are you spending time with the people that you want to spend time with? Okay, now your community. But you have to check in on that every 3 months, because let's be honest, especially in today's day, there's so much going on. And there are so many things that come your way and throw wrenches into the plan. If you don't have a method set up to allow yourself for that change, to get out of the rigidity of, let's say, the 5-year plan thinking, then you're going to spiral. You're going to fail. You're not going to do what you need to do. You're going to get stuck in that negative mindset, and you're going to feel like a failure, not knowing where to start again. And it goes back to data. I talked about data first because that's what it is. You made data. You wrote down this plan. So every 3 months, you have to go and look at it. Make the tweaks that you need to. And most importantly, ask yourself why. Did you accomplish something? Great. Why? Congratulate yourself for positive things you did well. But if you didn't complete something that maybe you had put on your plan that you were going to get done in those 3 months, or you're totally off course on a different long-term goal, why? Every 3 months is an opportunity for you to break down those barriers and figure out if there's something in your life that you're not thinking about that you need to change. Some of us have some people in our life that might take a lot of our time. Maybe you need to set some boundaries with people, or even boundaries with family, or coworkers or other friends, to say, no, I need 1 hour a week to do this thing. And the data has shown me that I said I was going to do it for 3 months and I've done nothing. The power of diving into your why and looking at what happened and how do I make a change allows you to have a quick cycle. It's only been 3 months. It's not like it's been a whole year and now you're in 2026 January asking yourself why you didn't do, your 2025 goals. No, you're in Q2, you're just 3 months into 2025, and you have the ability to change, the ability to recorrect your course. And I'll leave you with this analogy. You usually, probably, unless you're going around town, you know exactly where you're going. You're not going to set off on a road trip without a map. Likely a lot of us have our phones or GPS actually streaming and showing exactly turn by turn where we're going to go. And the reason for that is efficiency. It's going to get you from A to B. And if you make a hiccup along the way, it's going to course correct and still get you there. If you don't do the 3-month check-in, if you don't look at your data, if you think just writing a plan is going to make your life different, it won't. It'd be like getting in the car and driving somewhere far away without a map. You might get there, but you sure are not going to get there efficiently, and you might have some unfortunate circumstances happen to you along the way.
Approaching these 3-month check-ins with curiosity and not, I think, really seeing it as a bit of an experiment. You're conducting experiments all of the time, and all you do, if the experiment doesn't go how you think it does, you might tweak something and try it again. And I think some people just tend to see they're not hitting their goals and think, right, that's it, it's not working, I'm giving up, and then just completely scrap the plan altogether. So how do you actually know when you are on the right path, or when you need to completely rethink and redraft your plan?
Well, that's a good question. I I truly leverage these summit events that I mentioned before multiple times in the last 10 years. I have had either career situations or life situations that were causing me lots of stress, lots of questions, lots of, I'm going to quit my job tomorrow. We can all relate in various high times of challenge, right? And it's very easy for the brain to get overwhelmed and want to make very rash, quick decisions or, wish for the immediate results, happy answer of just remove the bad and go towards something better. And I have found that that is where I jump into a summit event. Sometimes I have to have an emergency summit. I talked earlier about every 3 months, but it's really about space. So I actually create a space. Sometimes I have the luxury of going somewhere out of my house to do it, but it's about taking, let's say, a half day, 4 hours, whatever it might be, and creating a space in my home or in my office where I'm going to move things around. I'm going to make it seem a little different, sometimes, or somewhere else in my house, bring in some plants, bring in some art, whatever you need to do, create something that goes outside of your ordinary. You're going to have to shoo away the people in your life, family, or, if they're living in your house, or find a time when they're not around and you sit down, because that is your reflection point. That is your point to actually think through the logic of the situation you are in. Yes, we talked about data. You're going to review your plans and see where you're at, but it's about creating that separate space for you to dedicate all possible options to a given challenge. I'd love to be able to go, on a retreat or, somewhere really cool to do that. I'm actually an outdoor enthusiast. So I've got a camper van, and a lot of times it's just go out into nature and just connect with something else. But the main theme here is if you break your routine, if you get yourself a little bit out of the ordinary, your brain breaks a little bit. And when you do that, you can help yourself see more clearly. You can go through some of that data. You can dream a little bit bigger, and you can say, for this moment, for this day, for these hours, what do I need to do? How do I get there? And to be honest, you can't always do it alone. The other thing I will mention at this time, in answering your question, is the summit method. Contrary to what I've been saying a lot of, get some alone time, shoo out the family, make sure you have some thoughts. It's also something to use with another person. So I like to use it with my husband. So we've been doing this for over 10 years. It's something that we sit down and do our summit event together. So if you're in a relationship or, a very close friend or a family member or an accountability partner, as it will, you can do it with another person. And the value of bringing in another mind when you are going through a struggle moment, as you're mentioning, is they can help you think a little differently. They can help ask some questions and pool some different things. And they get to grow and do their summit plan too. So it brings accountability into the page of sitting down and doing that thing. And that's what I did. I would have interesting moments in life. And once I would plan my summit event, I could actually look at all the data and say, I can't quit my job tomorrow. I can't afford to quit my job tomorrow. But wait, what do the next 3, 6, etc. months look like? What are steps I could do this month that might set me up at a spot where I could leave this position and start this new endeavor that really excites me or takes me to the next level? So it's those moments of clarity when you sit down either with another person or yourself and you really think through a problem. When we're stuck in our everyday, we're just like spiraling around. Oh, I got to have breakfast and my life is falling apart. And wait, we got to pick up the kids. And you don't stop and pause and really just let yourself think. And that's the point of the events. Yes. That's the point of the 3-month check-ins is to do that.
I'm thinking of is similar to where you were working in engineering. You end up in, say, doing a degree. You've got your 5-year plan thinking you're going to go into civil engineering, go and start going down that route. And then you're 3 years into that plan, making good headway, but you don't feel fulfilled. And I know one of the things you do speak about is having a life purpose statement. What steps, when you're in that position, you're halfway through your plan and you're thinking, I need to redirect my life towards something that gives me purpose. Where do you actually start figuring out what your purpose is in the first place?
Absolutely. I believe that finding your life purpose is number one. It's why in all of the books that I write, I start that as chapter one with different methods to help people find a life purpose statement. It is a mental tool. And in order to conquer anything in life, you have to start with mental tools. If you don't have a life purpose statement or other mental tools to help you through difficult situations, you will trip, fall, and have a very difficult time getting back up if you get back up. So you start with mental tools. And the life purpose statement is a number one for me. And here's why and how you do it. It's going to guide you. It's that guiding light that you have. And it needs to help you get to that fulfillment. How do you feel, the joy and fulfillment in life? To do that, I actually go back to the whole mind map thing I talked about earlier in the session. And I have people sit down and say, so I'll repeat the one question I mentioned. What are events, people, or things that happen to you in your life that have deeply affected you? Good or bad. And you set a timer for 5 minutes and you start writing everything out on paper. This might draw up some emotional things for some of us, but it's important because you have to address some of those deeper emotions that we either can push down or hide away, or, we don't realize are coming up and affecting our ability to really grow in life. Then you're going to talk about, or you're going to do another mind map where you're going to say, what does my ideal life look like? Okay. Let off everything. You want to retire on a private island and own a giant yacht? Write it down. It doesn't matter whether it's possible or, if you think it's possible. The point is to understand what you would like your ideal life to look like. And remember, I make sure people are doing personal growth, financial, career, and community. In all 4 of those pillars, what does your ideal life look like? And you start building up this positive energy of what you'd like to see. And there's a few other questions I talk about in the book, but essentially you do a series of, there's about 4 or 5 mind maps, and then you start funneling in some themes. And when I did this, I started realizing, I have a lot of themes around helping other people. And I also have a lot of themes around health and wellness, items that are on the mind map. And so I funneled those into themes, these buckets. So as you review each of your maps, you start realizing that while these were all separate ideas and separate thoughts, you may have a lot of separate thoughts around family or your career or, sports, whatever, travel, whatever it is that you are into or your life is around, you start seeing those themes. And then I take those themes and I start asking myself why. Why do I want to help people? And then you answer, I want to help people because I believe it will make a difference. Well, why do you want to make a difference? I want to make a difference because if, a positive difference, because if a positive difference happens, then I'm helping others and they're having joy and, the world is turning in a better way. Well, why does that matter to you? And you just keep asking why until you funnel down to something that's very specific, something that really drives you. My life purpose is to help others so that they can better themselves and therefore build a legacy for future generations to continue to better themselves and build the confidence to grow and to be who they want to be. And then I take that life purpose statement or statements. Some people have multiple, especially if you're creating one for personal growth and one for career, one for community, one for financial, and you write them out. You put them on your door, you put them on the nightstand or your bathroom mirror or on your phone, somewhere you might see it. See it every day. It should be something that, burns so bright for you that when you're having a hard day and you read that and you see that, it hopefully lights a little bit of a spark in you to say, oh yeah, okay, I'm going to give myself the space today to maybe not be in the best spot because we do have to have dark days in order to have light days. but I'm going to leverage this life purpose statement to help me grow, to bring me back up, to get me out of the spiral, to give me the energy to get back into that life plan, to get back towards my goals, and to get back into execution. And without that, you go day in and day out, and you realize you wake up 6 months later and you are either nowhere closer to where you want to be, or you're in the negative direction. Use a life purpose statement to every day make sure you're walking down the course that you want to be walking down. And naturally, a lot of times the details will start filling in because you're living your life of purpose, your life of how you want to exist and how you want to be.
It's fascinating how you really do identify those life experiences and events that have happened in your life that does dramatically affect how you think. I think I've done a similar task before where you write down all of the different traits that you think might be important, whether it's trust, fairness, kindness, empathy, spreading joy, all of these things. And then you get rid of half of the ones you've written down. You think, what are the least important? Get rid of those half. And you keep doing that until you're left with 5, and then really start examining why are those things important. And it does go back to, in most circumstances, something's happened at some point in your life. So for example, one of mine was fairness. And really thinking back to it, that leads back to a memory from being about 12 years old in school and seeing somebody getting bullied. And being a 12-year-old, I didn't do anything at the time, just kind of don't want to get involved, don't want it to be me next. And then that still comes back to me even at 45 years old now, where you think that was so unfair, and it's had a lasting impact, and that's why fairness is so important to me now. And I think that exercise you've just described does exactly that. It's really drilling down into why things are important. And then it does mean it's a lot more, if you're leaning into those things, it's a lot more fulfilling whatever you do end up doing. So yeah, it's a really great exercise. I know you've talked a number of times about the four key pillars of success. So is there one that you see people tend to neglect over and above the others?
This is a great question. I'm so glad you asked, because yes, absolutely. And it's community. We take for granted that, we have family and that it exists. And of course, you can just call them up, or they're there in the background. Sometimes, whether it's immediate family or, extended family, they're there. And friends, they exist. Sometimes you see them, sometimes you don't. Sometimes they move away and you don't ever see them again. The reason for some of those challenges, the reasons for, okay, there's a lot of reasons, but hear me out for right now. And this reason, relationship struggles and things like that are because most people don't realize you actually need to set goals or intentions around your community. An example would be, I like to, let's say it's a bookshelf. And on my tiered bookshelf here, I'm going to take my family, and, whether it's immediate family all the way to extended, and I'm kind of going to rank them. And that's going to sound weird. I'm not going to rank. Why would I rank my family members? But it's important, because if there are individuals in your family who are you're very close with, or they really matter to you, a lot, then put them up on that bookshelf and make active ways of engaging with them. I have friends who, of course, they love their mother and their family, but they don't really talk to them that often. They would put their mother on this bookshelf and yet not make the actions of creating that relationship or taking it to nurture. We take advantage of that. We just think it should be there. It's always going to be there. And I really challenge people to make small steps and big steps. Maybe a big step is planning a family reunion, or starting traditions. Every year we all get together and do this thing, and maybe not everybody can show up, but we still plan it. We do it every year. Or, to your immediate family, every month you and your children do this, very specific thing. For me, I always go camping with my dad and my sister and, our spouses and others every year. We plan a camping trip. And it's simple, but it's so important. We see each other occasionally in different times throughout the year, but that is something we look forward to. That is something we plan. And those memories, they build, and they're so important to do. And none of that would happen if we didn't have that goal, or we didn't have that plan to do that thing. it funnels down even to a more simple thing, which is, just quick text, quick conversation. Some of us hate being on a group chat, but the power of a group, message is just saying hi and having a way to share some photos with the aunts and uncles and seeing life, right? We get so sucked into social media, but you can create your own intimate social media via text messages and sharing what's happening. Your friends are people that they're either, local and you can just see anytime, or I have a lot of friends that are actually living in other states or in other areas. And I have to reach out to them regularly and say, hey, this year, where are we all going to meet up and see each other? If you don't do that, they dwindle away and you grow and grow in age. And you look back and you're like, where are my people? What am I doing? So you have to nurture relationships. You have to actually set goals and create actions around people. And that's just family and friends. At that point, you also need to look at community. Humans are meant to be around other humans. So if there's something you like doing, hobbies or sports or religious, join those organizations. Go volunteer. Go, maybe you're a business person, go join your local business association and start meeting new people. The more interactions we have, the better our mental health and our mindset can be. And a lot of people just go day in, day out and just live life and assume that those interactions will just happen. And they will. They will. But I challenge you that it will be far more powerful. And you will get so much further in your other goals in life if you make sure to actively look at community. Now, that being said, I will leave you with community is a lot harder to say, what's my 5-year goal, with community? What's that big goal? It doesn't have to be. Community can be as simple as every year I'm going to go on this camping trip with my dad. That's it. I don't need a 5-year objective with that. I just need to know that that is my objective. And I can look at those and review those type of things, put them on calendar, see where we're at. Those are all the positive things. And I'll leave you with the negative side of community. There are people in your life who are toxic or bringing you down, whether it's, a coworker, a manager, or maybe you've just got that friend that, you've been friends for a long time, but things have changed and your life has changed. Remember the opposite side of community planning. It is also an opportunity for you to see where you might need to remove or change things out of your friends, family, coworker, community organization groups and end them or taper down the time. Set boundaries with people. I think a lot of us are terrible about boundaries, and community is an opportunity for you to learn boundary creation and execution. So from the positive to the slightly negative, I find that so many people take for granted community planning, and I really hope something resonates, with your audience here when I say this, to go out today and build something in your relationships with other human beings. It will make everything better. The whole world will very slowly ripple into being a better place.
I'm intrigued. Once you've created your life purpose statement, is that something that you share with friends or family? Is that something you've done before?
Yeah, it's a really good question because a lot of what we're talking about today is very intimate, right? We're asking ourselves to think deep in our minds and talk about things that maybe we're uncomfortable sharing with others. So remember, your mind is a sandbox for both positive things and nightmares. So the more you can learn to have confidence to share your purpose statements or share your plans with others, you get this really cool side effect called accountability. You have now told somebody this thing and they know, and you know that they know, and they're not necessarily going to do anything about it. They probably in one ear out the other. They're not going to index daily on your life purpose statement. But it's the power that you feel accountable because you told this other person about your goal or your task this month or your life purpose statement. And it will grow in you. That's why I like to do these summit events with a partner, because now you have an accountability partner, right? It's an interesting question because it's hard. It's choice. It is a choice for you to decide to share with others. But I think if you can figure out how to have the confidence to share these pieces of your plan,
Yeah, I
it
think
will
it just,
only make
let's say,
things
it
better for you.
deepens those bonds. It is sharing something intimate. And actually, you can get an awareness to help break down any potential barriers too. If you do know where the other person's coming from and what's so important to the other person, if you understand why they've got strong beliefs around, like, so whether it could be community or trust or anything like that, if you understand why that's so important to them, it can make any of those difficult conversations a lot easier, having a bit of a insight into where that comes from. So yeah, I think it's like I say, a difficult conversation to have, but I think it could really help
Absolutely.
just relationships in general, really, and help build that community and intimacy with people. So I know you've spoken a little bit about quite a bit about your book so far, but who's the kind of ideal person? Who's that book written for?
Great question. The ideal person in which the book is written for is really, I would say, the young professional who has gone through, all of this growth, your son's engineering, and they jump into life, and now it's kind of like, well, what now? And I was told my whole life, go to school, get a job, be successful. And I did it. So now what? Or, someone who has suddenly been given the opportunity to have more choice. You get to learn finances. You get to jump through your careers. You're trying to build community, build who you are. This is something that's really going to be tailored to you. But what I have found over, the last couple of years of working with people and going through the method is that there is also this very other critical point in life where it might be parents who empty nest, their kids have moved out or gone to university or whatever it might be. They just spent 18 years, 20 years, whatever it might be, dedicating their life to this other soul. Now what? So the theme here is people who feel like they're going through a transformational stage and they feel a little bit of a spiral and they want to know, am I on the right path, or how do I determine a path and then achieve it? This is just a method to help you. There's lots of methods to make a life plan or a 5-year plan and all that kind of stuff. And mine is centered on mental tools, the planning technique itself, and then execution habits, seeing the data, your goals right on the mirror or whatever it might be. And those 3 things are something that when people are going through a transformational phase in life, they're looking for that. They're looking for something that's not just a to-do list. That's not just, hey, be positive. You can do this. You can't just have mental abilities. You can't just execute because you'll just go in a loop and, get there. And you can't just have a detailed plan that sits on the desk and goes nowhere. So that is who I focus on. Initially, it was, these young professionals because I went through that story. I built the Summit Method for 10 years as I went through that, myself. So I can resonate there. But I've learned so many other powerful stories and people along the way to funnel it to going through big changes in life makes it so that you need help funneling that chaos down so that you can climb your mountain, get to the peak, and look out at the beautiful views. And more importantly, see new mountain peaks to make the next
sounds like
plan.
a fantastic just book filled with tips and tricks, and I know you've shared a lot of them with us already today. And I just love the holistic impact as well, just the holistic wellness and just accounting for all aspects of life and not just focusing on one area such as career or social or anything else. I think it's a great approach to it. And I can see it's going to have an impact on a lot of people around the world, hopefully. So hopefully that we'll be able to get people directed to you online. Where is the best place to find you?
Absolutely. Head to my website, www.conqueryoursummit.com, and my contact information is there, links to the book. I have courses, audiobooks, other things, social media, all that jazz. I usually social media handles under The Summit Method. That's the book I just finished, which is really, if you're someone that you've gotten anything out of this podcast and you want to just jump right into the meat and get started, This book I just wrote is a quick read. It goes the 3 steps to success. It's called The Summit Method, a 3-step strategy for self, wealth, and community. And that's going to get you right there, streamlined. And the website would be where
Fantastic.
you should go, and you can find all of those things. Free.
Can you tell us about a book that's had a huge impact on yourself?
Absolutely. There is a book called The Miracle Morning by Hal Elrod. And I was going through a crazy transformational time in my life. I had decided to leave the aerospace industry and just figure out what life was. I had my own crisis, moment of who am I? I'm spiraling. Even with something like the Summit Method, you're like, what am I doing? And then you use the Summit Method to get yourself back on track. And that's what I did. And I went through this book as well, where Hal Elrod talks about these, 6 things you do every morning. And one of them was reading. Or he said, or write. If you always wanted to write a book, write for your 10 minutes or whatever it might be. And that's when it kind of all hit me of, I am going through this transformational time in my life. I have leveraged this thing for so many years. I'm going to do that. I'm going to be inspired by the Miracle Morning and start building the Summit Method and start writing my books and be able to dive deeper into who I am, learn from my past, and chart my future. So it all kind of started with that
bit already, but I'm fascinated to know what the symptoms were when you were on the wrong path. You said you were in engineering, you made that decision to make a change, but what were some of the symptoms that you were seeing that let you know that you weren't on the correct path for you?
Absolutely. So, I found that, and I don't know if it's a corporate 9-to-5 thing, but I found that I was just in the grind and I would get distracted. You check in for work. I was working so many hours. And as I went through the Summit Method, every 3 months, I would continuously see in my personal growth that music was set to the side. That for 10 years, I'd been saying I was going to record my album. And I never did. And it's that data. I talked a lot about that. You have to build a plan. You have to look at the data. You have to act on the data. And my method of that in some of the things in my life was realizing time and again, the data is showing that you want this thing, yet you are not choosing to make any progress on that thing. I'm playing music for people. I do open mics. I write music. But you've been talking about recording your album. Why isn't that happening? And as I stacked up some of these deeper passions, which for many of us, those passions always go to the back burner because they're not going to bring in the income or whatever reason it is. You don't have the time. It's, fantasies of the past, whatever it might be. And I said, I am in a unique spot where I could leave this career for a bit and actually invite those things to come center stage. I'm a muralist, so I love doing these big murals. Let's go do some more murals. Let's find a recording studio, start recording the album. And I gave myself the time to explore those other things. Now, not all of us have the ability to just quit their job and, go try this thing. I had to build up to that. Just like you build up a down payment to buy a house, I built up the opportunity to say I could quit my job for this amount of time to explore these pieces of myself. I regret nothing because it was so critical for me to learn facets of me that were always there. And I never gave, the time of day to allow them to start growing and flourishing. Now, I did eventually end up going back to technical program management and, going back into industry. And that's okay. And I did it because I wanted to, right? I actually learned how much I enjoy that work. Even though in the moment you feel like, I don't want to do this anymore. I want out. I want to do music. I want to do this. And you never know until you go try those things. You have to either figure out how to insert them into your life while you are still working so that you could try them out, or do something like I did, where it eventually made me realize, Aliki, you are an engineer. Your brain is programmed like an engineer. Even if you're like, I'm not an engineer, I don't do engineering anymore. it's amazing. It's amazing to give yourself space.
It does just highlight how important those check-ins are. And the next question I wanted to ask you about was, is there one habit that you swear by on a daily basis to get you in the right mindset for the day?
Yes, it's simple. I absolutely love every single morning getting up and either making an espresso or I brew tea. And it sounds simple, like a lot of people wake up and have coffee, right? I actually create it into a mental space. It is this joy that I get every day to, grab which loose leaf tea am I going to pick out of the drawer? And it's the art of making it the right temperature, sitting and enjoying something that you made to put intention in the day and think about what kind of mental state I'm going to choose to have, rather than the alarm goes off and you jump out of bed and you're like, I gotta get out of here. I gotta make the kids lunch. I gotta, run to a meeting, whatever it might be. I choose to add in time every morning to actually have peace with the beverage of choice, in which case it's usually tea, but occasionally I'll, sip an espresso. But yeah, it's super simple, but it is a habit that initially, it was just, drinking something in the morning. But over time, I started realizing the mental effects, the positive abilities of taking a quick meditation moment in the morning. I'm not sitting there for hours, right? It's just having silence in the morning is very powerful.
It triggers something in your brain, and the repetitiveness, a constant association of positive thoughts. And just like if you hear the theme tune to an episode of a program you really love, as soon as that theme tune hits, it just puts you in that frame of mind. So yeah, I completely resonate with that. I think that's the last question I've got for you today, Aliki. Is there any final thoughts you would like to leave our listeners with?
I will leave the final thought of today, grab a piece of paper, grab a pen, and create a mind map. Set a timer for 5 minutes and ask yourself what your ideal life looked like. Actually take a moment and see what comes to mind. It could be a really fun exercise for people to do, but we're all lost in the hustle and bustle of life. And I challenge everyone to just take a moment and learn how to mind map. From there, you can do any kind of mind map you want. Every time you're in a challenge or a struggle, just put the struggle you have in the center of your page and then start coming up with all the thoughts that come to mind on why you're struggling or what's happening. But if you learn how to do a mind map, you can learn how to take your mind and put it on paper. That way you can start making actions to make change for yourself.
And for all of our listeners, if you have been feeling stuck or you feel like you've needed a plan, I'm sure this episode's given you some serious clarity. So Aliki's approach makes goal setting practical. So if you do resonate with some of what she said today, do please go and check out the Summit method and start mapping out your own plan. But yeah, thanks very much for coming on, and yeah, I really appreciate the chat. Thank you.
Thank you for having me. It was really awesome.